Welcome to the Tough Decisions Daily Show with your hosts, Dan and Danae Hanford. As entrepreneurs and real estate investors, we are faced with tough decisions on a daily basis. These tough decisions can either make us or break us. On this show, you will hear from highly successful people sharing their stories behind tough decisions that they have had to make along their journey of success. In every episode, you will be able to learn from the thought processes behind the tough decisions that were made. Some of these decisions will have amazing outcomes and some not so much. So without further ado, your hosts, Dan and Danae.
With us today is Paul Carney, who has over 30 years of experience building companies, developing enterprise software solutions, and leading teams in worldwide organizations. His experience in startup businesses and the HR profession give him a unique perspective on the ever-changing business marketplace. Thank you for being on with us today, Paul. And if you would just fill in a little bit of the gaps there as far as your background goes and tell us how you got to where you are in your entrepreneurial businesses today.
Sure. Thank you both for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I actually started my career as a high school math teacher, but fell in love with computers when the internet came along, when the World Wide Web came along. I started my first web business in 1997. I saw this World Wide Web thing and said, I got to figure out how to take advantage of this, and built it, sold it in 99, started another one with some friends in 99, sold that in 2000, and then built another one in 2005 that's actually still running strong today. But I fell into HR with a huge need. People ask me, say, how'd you go from business IT to HR? And I say, HR is a business. HR should be treated like
that.
Business.
Is very true.
And it's actually HR teams are starting to learn that now. It's funny, when I came in, they all looked at me like I had three eyes, and I said, no, HR should be run like a business. So that's my latest challenge, sort of from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is to really figure out how to get HR teams to think more, not only like trusted advisors within the organization, because some of them do that well, but really to think like business people.
So Paul, tell us a little bit about what's some of the tough decisions. I mean, obviously, as an entrepreneur from all the way back to 1996, 1997, you've had a lot of tough decisions that you've had to make along the way. And I'm sure there's probably a couple that stick out to you that, really either shake your fist at and wish they were a little bit different, but obviously you learned some lessons from those. So can you start off by telling us a little bit about a tough decision that you made that maybe didn't go so well for you and some lessons that you learned from it?
So I will say the first tough decision, especially back in that day when the World Wide Web was so new, was figuring out how to take advantage of, and I'll say, new set of tools available, because it's pertinent to today's issues too, trying to figure out how do you take advantage of everything in technology that's available to you to really drive business. And back in 1997, I had to build my own shopping cart. I had to build integration to credit cards. That stuff did not exist. And I built an online, it ended up being a baby gift basket business. It got written up in the Wall Street Journal, and it took off to the point that I couldn't even handle it anymore. It grew so fast. So one of the challenges I faced was really figuring out how to use the tools of the trade. And in this case, a lot of the stuff is technology based, to really determine what to do. And I can't say I did it well. If I look back, if everyone's ever heard of the Wayback Web, you can go back and look at what websites looked like back then. Oh my gosh, I look back at it and go, that was horrible. I used this light pink background and frame of 3, and it was just, you remember the spinning mailbox logo?
Oh, yes.
I had the spinning mailbox logo out there. So I look back and cringe going, okay, I should have understood that a little bit better, but I guess.
Did you also have AOL?
Yes, I did, actually. In fact, I used to be Prodigy and CompuServe, before.
Yep, I remember
AOL
that too.
And AOL was great because suddenly now every time I clicked on something, it didn't refresh my screen at 2400 baud. So I think the biggest thing I learned back then was, and I still think there's things I could have done differently, but it was the time it was, the tools available. Fast forward to today, and you get the same struggles. People say, how do I build a mobile app? How do I build a decent website? How do I take advantage of AI? And there's just so much stuff that it's a challenge. It really is a huge challenge.
So I'm curious because, as you mentioned, things are constantly changing and there's always something new. And I think, like you touched on, a big part of your decision making is trying to decide, is it worth my time to go and do this, or is this just going to be a fad that, a few months from now is not going to matter and no one's going to care about? So do you remember or recall anything that you maybe tried and a couple weeks or even months later it was, I shouldn't have done that, or maybe something that you originally passed on and then realized, I should have taken advantage of that?
So I'll fast forward to the real challenge when that really happened to me is when the third company, when we got venture capital. That's a whole nother world. There's clearly some things we could have done differently going after venture capital. But once we got the venture capital, I kick myself in the butt now going, there were some things we could have done to prepare ourselves for that and to prepare ourselves for where the business could go. We were so tied into what we were currently doing. And when the money came in, we just stayed on that same track, even though, and this was 2006, 2007, things were changing around us so much. And of course, what we know now is the iPhone was about to come out in 2009, and that changed the entire world of phones and apps. But we just weren't ready for that. We were still in this mode of using the older technologies. We weren't paying attention to how technology was changing so much. And I look back at that saying, I wish we had been having some conversations with technologists who could help us understand here's where it's going next. When you really look at the futurist people, the people looking out to 10 years, which is even hard today, you could even say 5 years, you need to pay attention to what they're talking about. Sometimes we dismiss them saying, oh, that's not going to happen. You need to pay attention because if it does, you better be prepared for it.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know about you, but I was actually a big non-advocate, if you will, for Facebook and social media.
Right.
Because I literally didn't do text messaging until probably about 2000, I don't know, probably 2009.
It's probably 2010.
2010.
I was going to say, yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. No one's going to do it. It's not a good idea. Not going to be a big thing. And I just ignored it. And of course, I did the same thing with Facebook. I didn't want to be on there. I didn't want anybody looking at me and seeing all my business and all this kind of stuff. And then once it started to go, I just realized, wait, this is the wave of the future. This is not going anywhere. This is like, big time stuff.
Yeah. And today it's Instagram. I still cannot figure out how to manage Instagram.
I'm with you on that one.
We were just talking about that today, I think.
It's amazing. Now, LinkedIn, and I've gotten some Facebook stuff and even Twitter, managing Twitter to a certain level, but I've got so many friends. Mark Metry, a guy who does podcasts out there and has been very successful, young guy, great guy. He keeps talking about how Instagram's the fire and it's the bang. I'm like, I just can't figure Instagram out. My daughter uses it all the time. My adult children use it. I still can't get it. And that's my today. That's my thing going. I'm still trying to figure out how do I take advantage of this thing, but I just don't know.
That's so true, man. We definitely were just talking about that today because I'm like, I don't know what the big deal is about it, but I think it's the younger generation just loves the ability to have that. I think the biggest thing I think the Instagram has is the fact that, well, for one, now it's connected to Facebook,
right.
But with Instagram, you get a whole nother level or a whole other layer of personality and experience and behind the scenes with various experiences. And I think that is going to be the wave of the future. I was actually at a conference this past Wednesday at the Porsche headquarters in Atlanta, and there was a gentleman there talking about live video feeds that are going to be unique personal experiences. And one of the examples he gave was people being able to pay for a personal live video feed of a race car, and being on the dash of a race car driver and being able to pay for that type of a service. That's phenomenal, because that's really where I see where a lot of this technology is going as well is being able to create more experiences and more personal and unique experiences that not everybody is getting.
And we know the millennials now outnumber everyone else. When you lump together basically Gen Z, Gen Y, they outnumber all of us. So it's back to my point before is we've got to figure it out. We can't ignore it. We can't just say, oh, that's a younger person thing. No, because they're going to drive the market. And if I can't figure out how to use Instagram, I might be left behind.
Well, and we have to be balancing that constantly with the whole concept of the shiny object syndrome.
Correct.
Because we can all get caught up with this new technology and new things and all this kind of stuff, but a lot of times they can be more distractions than they are actually helpful. And to bring on some sort of a mentor or advisor or technology, guru that can actually help kind of let us weed through those different pieces, I think is important. And I think as we're talking and laughing back and forth about Instagram, it's definitely there. It's definitely going to be the wave of the future. We just have to be able to, immerse ourselves in the knowledge behind it to be able to grasp the knowledge and actually implement that knowledge to affect our businesses.
Right. And that's one of the questions, one of the things we talk about today is, so what do you do when you face these challenges? And as I said before, the key is, and you just said it again, Dan, too, is to find people who understand a little bit of it, know where it's going, and can guide you. And that's so important. And today, we call them experts sometimes, or subject matter experts and things. But sometimes these people aren't even necessarily the experts. They're just the ones seeing the platform for its abilities, and you got to listen to them. And that's why I love to expand my knowledge. When I'm on LinkedIn, I follow so many different types of people because I want to hear and see what are they talking about and what are they discussing that I need to start paying attention to.
Well, and I think that is also where focus groups are important as well.
Correct.
Because when you're trying to figure out in your particular business if Instagram is the way to go, well, you need to figure out who your customers are and go to them and start to do some focus groups with them and figure out, is this an avenue and is this something that they're using? Because if they're not, then Instagram might not be the best option for your business.
Correct. And it always comes back to any of us that run businesses. We've got the three major resources we got limited of: time, talent, and cash. So you've got to figure out how to manage those three things very effectively. And especially as an entrepreneur, it is really tough to do that. So you can't get caught up, as you said, Dan, in that shiny object and head off down a path, but you got to be looking forward. You can't be looking down. If you've ever ridden a bicycle or even driving a car, you can't stare at the road right in front of you for too long because you're going to veer off the path. You got to kind of keep ahead, looking ahead, saying, I got to see what's coming up.
Exactly. So along this journey, you've talked about some tough decisions. Does another tough decision stick out in your mind that had a really positive outcome, that maybe it was an outcome that, maybe you didn't expect, but you made the decision. It really, was one that really kind of like made you sit back and go, wow.
So yeah, we had one. It was the third company when I sold my database product to a guy who had a voice product, an IVR, interactive voice response system, and back in 2005. And we were heading down this path, doing all this stuff, and we got a client that came in, and we helped them with a little voice thing, a phone-based thing. And then they kept asking us, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And at some point, my partner and I looked at it going, they're taking us down this weird path, and I don't know if this is really where we want to go. Should we just tell them, no, we can't do that? Of course, you're a small company. There's 4 of us. It's like, but you can't turn down revenue. So we ended up following this path and finally started asking them questions, saying, what do you do? What is this retail marketing area? They work in the retail marketing space. What do you do and how do you do this? Fast forward to 2 or 3 years later, we built a solution for them that not only was phenomenal, we got the top 2 largest companies in that retail marketing space, and these are big companies. We went to a conference where the other software vendors, we were software as a service, they were upset at us because we had just kind of come into their market, but we came in because we just started asking questions and said, what are you trying to do? They kept thinking they wanted us to solve problem A. We started asking questions, said, no, you need to solve problem X. And we built a system for them that is actually still kicking butt today, that actually has solved a lot of issues in the retail marketing space.
That's pretty exciting because we talk a lot of times about, sometimes the most important decisions we say are no, but you didn't necessarily say no and you didn't necessarily say yes. You just kind of continued to investigate it to figure out, was there something else there that could be turned into a yes?
We got curious. We were curious about, well, what are you trying to accomplish? More so, can you set up a voice system to do this? Yes, we can do that. And we did it. And then after a while, we just started saying, there's got to be something more here too. And that's what led us down this path to a very successful path. And I'm glad, and I learned something from that. And I teach people that today is being curious, of course, to have that learnability quotient, to want to continuously learn, but keep asking what someone's trying to accomplish. Don't just assume on face value of when they say they need you to solve one problem. Kind of ask where that problem fits into the overall scope, because you may have some knowledge and experience that shows them another path that they're not even thinking about.
So when you were making these tough decisions, did you ever have people kind of, in the back of your head or, in your ear a little bit kind of saying, no, don't make that decision, or no, don't do that? Kind of discourage you a little bit?
Yes, I tend to be a visionary type person. My personality type and everything is about vision. I tend to look at 10 different things and see the commonalities between them and draw the circle that no one else really sees. And that's a tough spot to be because you get a lot of naysayers. People will look at you and say, that doesn't make sense. And you push a little bit more. And after a while, they'll kind of see, oh yeah, that does coalesce. Doesn't mean every idea comes out perfectly. But there's always those people. So I found, and it's interesting because you'll tend to want to lean towards the people who will agree with you, but I don't. I actually prefer, and again, it's back to my personality style, I will actually take the other side of a debate on something I don't believe in just to get the other person to tell me how they're thinking and feeling, because I want to understand it to help form my opinions. So that's the same thing in business to me, is I try not to make sure I'm just surrounding myself with the people who agree or understand. I want the naysayers, because they may bring out some points and values that I'm not thinking about.
It helps give you a more balanced perspective on the decision you're making.
It does, but it's tiring. It's really, it takes a lot of energy to do that. I agree. Because it's much easier to be around people that kind of agree with you than it is to be in this mode of, because you even feel yourself sometimes going, all right, if I just find someone who agrees with me, but then you have to resist that challenge, because the only way we learn to get better is to be challenged, and challenging requires people who are going to question, why are you doing that? What are you trying to do?
Well, I think it is tiring, and I know that just not because I'm the visionary. I'm not. I'm the naysayer half of our partnership. Dan's the visionary, and I'm the one always wanting to know, how's that going to happen, and when are we, I want to know every detail before we start. But I think, over time, we've come to appreciate the differences and how that makes a good partnership. So awesome. I think it can be tiring, but when you realize, the value of the other perspective, then you can appreciate that.
I think it can be sometimes tiring for your side as well, right?
Yeah, probably a little bit.
Yeah, so trust me, my wife is that same way. In the Myers-Briggs, she's the SJ, I'm the NP. So yes, she wants the list, the checklist, show me. And I'm like, oh no, it's this.
It's exhausting.
It is.
For everybody.
Fire, ready, aim.
Exactly.
So can you tell us, Paul, what you do when you're facing a tough decision? What is your strategy in making those hard decisions?
So the first thing I do is, because I'm a different type of learner, so I actually write it down, and I actually don't type it. I've learned I can't type it on the computer or type it on the phone. I physically write it in a notebook. For some reason, writing it, and I know psychology has shown that writing things down, you tend to retain better. I actually can think better writing. In fact, a lot of notes from my book, before I put my book together, were written in a notebook. And then I typed a lot of stuff on the computer, of course, to get it there, but for the manuscript, but the actual writing was in a notebook, because ideas would come. So I actually write the thought down first and start to process it in just a notebook. And then I come to sort of some decisions. I put my pros and cons kind of together, sort of a SWOT analysis of sorts. And then I find people, and I said, I don't necessarily find people who I think will agree. I find people who are actually going to challenge me on my thoughts and ideas, to just bounce the idea off and say, tell me about this. What do you see? What do you think? And that's, to me, the easiest way. And I'll say, at some point, you do decide, if an idea is just not getting traction enough, it's either too early in time, it may be too early for its thought, or it just doesn't have enough gumption, and you got to learn to drop it. And that's hard to do, dropping that baby, especially if you've really formed this analysis and thought about it and got some feedback that's good. But at some point, you do have to just say, market timing is not right. There's just not a market for that. It doesn't make sense, and move to the next one.
Okay. Tell us, do you have a book or a resource that you would recommend to our listeners that has helped you in this decision making?
So I'll tell you, there's an author who writes a whole different variety of books, but the latest one that I think, and it's actually about 6 years old at this point, but if you read, I'm rereading it again today, and it is amazing how pertinent it is to today, even though 6 years ago it was written, and that's Dan Pink. And the one I'm rereading today, I've read all of his books, but the one I'm rereading today is To Sell is Human. And it talks about, Dan discusses the fact that if you don't think you're a salesperson, he tries to prove you wrong. And then he comes down to, there's a couple of specific things that if you do this or this, you're probably not a salesperson. Everyone else, you're in sales. And it talks about how to convince you that you need to be focused on being a salesperson, because you're always selling an idea, you're selling yourself, you're selling something to people. And it's a fascinating, he combines psychology very well with practical examples. He did it in Drive. Drive was one of my other favorite books of his, about how we, the extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. To Sell is Human is the latest one. It's great.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that, because, I'm a big believer in everybody is in sales of some form or fashion. I even talk about how my children sell me all the time, and that,
of course.
it's almost natural to them,
they figure out how to do it right too, don't they? They figure out, especially when my wife and I were just talking about it today, when the kids would ask us something and we ask one of us and say, did you go ask your mother? They go ask the mother and they go ask your father, and they get caught in this loop of they ask your father, ask your mother.
Or they know which one to ask. And so they purposely avoid the other one.
Correct. Because if they're going to get something they really want, so they figure it out pretty early. And that's something that we lose, probably a lot of other things in childhood. We kind of lose some of our stuff as we get older, but we should never lose that, because you're right. You always have to sell someone on an idea.
Well, it's funny because, it's a balance for the kids, because, you go tell them to do something or that they can't do something, and they come back with, what we might call back talking. And we've always been told and growing up, oh, don't back talk. But really that back talking, if you think about it, is a form of a second close, or a second, level of the sales process, where they've been told no, but they talk back because they're trying to convince you otherwise as to why you should do something. So I try not to discourage that too much, depending on what it is. Obviously, there is different forms of talk backing that is not good. But,
correct.
For example, my son the other day wanted to go to the office with me, and I was in the process of doing some recordings, and so he couldn't. So, I was like, well, son, you can't go with me because of X, Y, and Z. And of course, he does a second close with me and goes, but Dad, I'll be quiet. I'll go in the background or another room and I'll be quiet, So that it wasn't, let's say, back talking, but that's what we would consider that. But it was him trying to sell me.
It's negotiation, right?
Exactly.
Negotiation skills are phenomenal. You're not going to survive in politics and business. And trust me, I figured out how to negotiate to convince my wife to marry me. I don't know how I did it, but I did. So.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about some of the more exciting things that you have done with the money that you have made? Like maybe an exciting place you've traveled or an item that you've purchased up to this point.
So there was the smallest thing back in 1997, of course, when we did sell the product line to a national retailer. And I actually built their website because they had never had a website at that point. So I built their website stuff, and we got a pretty good chunk of cash. And I'll tell you, the one thing we bought, which I call it the marriage saver, because I was working my butt off at that point with 2 young children and doing all these great things. My wife was a pharmacist at the time, with a retail pharmacist, so she worked long hours. We bought a hot tub. And we spent time in that hot tub. We knew no matter how our days were going, and even when I was home, if I was not traveling, we would join each other in the hot tub. It was an outside hot tub. So like if it was a nice night where the light rain was coming or light snow, awesome time to be in a hot tub. That was our spot where we would sit and talk, and knew we were going to meet up in the hot tub. So it's not a very big, expensive thing, but that thing helped us communicate. It helped us come back out of everything we were doing. Kids were in bed. Now it's time to communicate.
What is one item that is on your bucket list right now that you want to do?
So it's to get an RV. And there's a few different things. There's parts of the country. I've seen a lot of parts of the country. My wife hasn't. I've traveled a lot for business, and she hasn't been to a lot of places. So I want to show her a lot of parts of the country. But there's also things like we love food and we love wine. So there's places to visit for those. But like you watch Guy Fieri's Diners, Dives, and Drive-Ins, and we see all these places. And I just want to create a map of all these cool places that have great food, and I want to drive around and visit them all.
And what you should do is hire a videographer to go around with you, and then you can write the whole thing off as a business expense.
Exactly, right? We could talk about our road trip. We could just, it could be our road trip following Guy Fieri. Where's Guy now? It's almost like, where's Waldo? We'll just follow Guy. Where's Guy now? And so anyways, that's sort of one of our bucket list things, besides the fact that next year we've been to wine country here. We're going to France to visit the wine country in France. We really do. We've learned a lot about wines and love wine a lot. So we're going to go and visit the southern parts of France for the wine country.
Well, Paul, how can the listeners reach out to you if they want to get some more information about you or start to follow you a little bit more and some of the things that you're doing right now?
Sure. They can go out. My website is Paul Carney Works, WORKS. So it's Paul Carney, WORKS.com, or on any of the social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, Paul Carney Works. All of
You're on
handles.
Instagram?
I am. Actually, my marketing team got me out there. I've got stuff out there. I just still can't figure it out. It's happening. I just don't know how to take advantage of it.
Well, Paul, thank you again for being on the podcast with us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today.
Great. Thank you both for having me, and I look forward to talking soon.
Sounds great.
Do you want to nominate a highly successful entrepreneur or real estate investor to be a guest on this show? Email us at dan@toughdecisions.net. Help us by spreading the word about our show with your friends And also take time right now to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite platform. You've been listening to the Tough Decisions Show.